Hello and welcome to the Majlis Central Asia podcast at Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. I am Mohammed Tahir, your host here in Washington, D.C. So the day has come. Uzbekistan is going to a presidential elections this weekend to elect its second leader of the independence years. Though the outcome of the elections are somewhat predictable, but citizens will have more than one candidate to choose from. Today on the Majlis, we will talk a little bit about the election, but more than that, we will focus on what is next for Uzbekistan and what does the developments under the acting President Mirziyoyev say about the future of the country. To talk about this subject, I'm joined by Bakhtiyor Nishanov, Regional Deputy Director for Eurasia at the International Republican Institute in Washington, D.C. Bakhtiyor is originally native of Uzbekistan. Bakhtiyor, welcome to the Majlis again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very nice to have you. Alisher Siddiq, Director of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Uzbekistan service is with us from Prague today. Alisher, welcome to the Majlis.
Thank you.
Thank you. Also joining us from Prague is Bruce Pannier, who is the editor of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Central Asia blog called Kishlag Awazi. Bruce, welcome to the Majlis.
Thank you.
Guys, great to have you. So, Alisher, let's start with you. How the election campaign has gone so far?
Yeah, it's most intriguing election campaign with a very narrow fight. It's the biggest joke now in Uzbekistan. So, in fact, everybody knows it's not about election. It's just an approval kind of process for current acting president and prime minister Shavkat Mirziyoyev. As you said, there's nothing to talk about.
How many candidates were there?
I know that, but I don't think we should discuss microorganisms.
I know.
In this fight.
I understand. Bakhtiyor, you tell me, how many candidates were there?
So there are 4 candidates that are taking part in this election. It's definitely, I definitely agree with Alisher that it's an interesting quote unquote election. I think everybody and their mother are sure they know who the next president of Uzbekistan is. I think it was pretty obvious from the get-go. I think I would differ with Alisher just a tiny bit. And, I was very skeptical about this whole process from the get-go. As you guys know, we've talked about extensively, and, I have had major reservations, obviously, about how Mirziyoyev took over as acting president. I mean, this was an unconstitutional move, and I think that's pretty obvious. Violated the Constitution, violated the process. It's not how it was supposed to be. But that said, there are a couple of things that I think are interesting. Just like Alisher said, I think this is the most interesting in a sense that this is the first time that I actually have seen some kind of get out the vote campaign, right? I mean, this is something that we used to in the United States and other countries where, you have, stars, movie stars, you have pop artists coming out and saying, this is the day to go vote, exercise your right, and so on and so forth. I mean, obviously that had happened in the past, but it was very, very, very kind of Soviet style, go do your duty as a citizen. This was a little bit more lighthearted. There were pop artists that would appeal to younger folks. So I think that's good in the sense that it helps build that sense of, some kind of sense of making a difference as an individual voter. I know ultimately it's not going to matter, but I think that was interesting. The other interesting thing is, in the past, when Karimov got reelected, I think he just didn't care about, how many people would show up. I think there's an effort to actually get out as many people as possible, because obviously Mirziyoyev is trying to show that there's a huge portion of population that is the turnout is important. Turnout in the past had always been just it was pretty much a figure. This time it is going to be a figure for sure, but they are trying to at least individually invite people and have them out to vote. So I think and just like was something we used in election campaigns around the world where you have election promises. In the past, with Karimov, obviously, like I said, he'd known all along what the result would be. There were no promises. So I think it was interesting. Some elements of or I guess I wouldn't say elements, I guess a lip service, I guess I would say, to some elements of a fair and free elections. I think it's interesting. And I think we'll see how it goes. I mean, we know what's going to happen, but I think it's interesting in the sense that it builds up that sense of, maybe this time around, something's going to be different, which I don't think is going to be. but still.
Oh, great! You had a lot to talk about this.
That's exactly why I didn't want to discuss it, because already what Bakhtiar said. Let me disagree on the point that this is sort of a call to fulfill citizenship duty is go vote thing. In Uzbekistan, when artists, show business kind of people, when they are appearing and saying go vote, they basically pledging allegiance to Mirziyoyev. So it's not a call for a duty. It's a more like show. It's a direct message to Mirziyoyev. I'm here at your service, my king. It's with Karimov. You don't need to do that because it would go without saying.
The king.
Now it's a new guy there, and obviously if you are kind of a big person in the country, and so you want to pledge allegiance like this publicly. So it's not it's a counter democratic process on the contrary.
Yes, I obviously understand the skepticism about the outcome. I was also watching the Uzbek TV for the couple of last days. You could clearly see the staged atmosphere, but you still had candidates presenting their programs, and their speeches are shown on TV much better than what Turkmenistan had or will be having in February next year. Bruce, we have been writing about Turkmenistan election regularly, and now you see the same thing is happening in Uzbekistan. So draw a comparison, if you like, in this.
Well, for one thing, at least, no matter what you can say about the upcoming elections, at least two of the candidates have already ran before, so they're somewhat known to the public, which in Turkmenistan's case is absolutely not true. It hasn't been in the previous two elections. The names of the candidates were announced. In fact, we don't even know, with February 12th being the election day in Turkmenistan, we don't even know who he's running against at all yet, and it's barely 2 months before the election, and we have no idea who the other candidates are. So that's something that's a little bit different in Uzbekistan's case, where at least the candidates are out there and they're getting already, they've had television coverage. I would say that, and Alishir or Bakhtiar might correct me on this, but I haven't seen the so-called opponents in the Uzbek election at least making a big deal out of Mirziyoyev. In previous elections with Karimov, his so-called opponents would come out and say, we agree with his policies 100%, and he's a great man, and practically say, why don't you vote for him instead of me? I haven't seen that in any of the text I've read, so I suppose that's a minor improvement. But, again, to compare it to the Turkmen elections, this is a better staged production than Uzbekistan is usually shown before, and far better than the ones that we've seen in Turkmenistan. I don't think anyone would be fooled that we're coming to a democratic poll here on Sunday or anything like that, but in any case, it looks a little bit closer to being something like an election than the previous ones we've seen in Uzbekistan, and certainly far more than what we're going to see in Turkmenistan or have seen previously. Just on one note, I think, although we know the outcome of the election, I think one of the critical moments in this election, and one of the most, maybe the only interesting thing about this coming election, is what percentage of the vote does Mirziyoyev get from the people? Is he so worried about his position that he needs 98%? Or is he comfortable enough that he would settle for 86% as a victory? I mean, it would tell us a little bit about what his situation is in terms of confidence in himself and his position.
It would tell, percentage would tell his psychological mood, basically. I don't think like some kind of confidence and comfort. They will have to rig these elections now, because in fact he will get 99%, and because they didn't want to show that he's a dictator from the very beginning, they would need to lower his percentage. So that's the challenge now, because the biggest challenge is to rig elections, with the votes, because with 99% you cannot. It doesn't look like very much open, transparent, democratic, and so on. So they will have to brought it down to some 80-70%. So that's my prediction.
We are in a very, very different area. So was there any debate of some sort between the candidates, or occasions where candidates expressed opinions about each other's plan, Alishir?
No debate. They all love each other. They don't have any disagreements on any policy. They don't have any thing that the other party would resolve differently.
And then how they differentiate themselves from each other?
There's no difference. It's just one person is like more, there's no fight, it's not a fighting kind of process. Maybe for those who listen to this podcast, it will be like something new. But here we have a puppet people who just appeared in the past 2 months. They never served in the government positions. Sort of one of them is former KGB, It's like a show, right? Really theatrical kind of a thing. And on the other hand, you have a prime minister for 13 years who knows everyone, appointed every single mayor, knows everybody in the face, ran the country economy, knowing everything in the country. What a choice, it's like very obvious that even in this situation, even I would go and vote for Mirziyoyev, It's instead of voting for someone who has nothing like behind, no experience, and ready to perform the role of a puppet, of course you would vote for a real person who knows at least what is Uzbekistan is, like on the economic. So again, if there is a fair, open, transparent elections now, the votes are counted correctly, everybody voted correctly, the vote will be for Mirziyoyev in any way. So, and unfortunately, that's the only challenge they have, is that he gets a lot of votes and then they have to rig it to bring it down.
Then the question is, what he's scared of, like, we had a German reporter in one of our last shows that she was kicked out of Uzbekistan recently. And then yesterday, I believe, I saw a report, Alisher, from your end, that a Russian reporter was also deported from Uzbekistan. So what he's scared of then?
It's not a scare, like it's not a sort of fear. The reporters have been kicked out from Uzbekistan for many years. It's a system of kicking out the reporters, automatic. It never gets approval from Mirziyoyev or Karimov's office. It's automatic. It's just by default. The system, the settings like this, there's a journalist who's doing some stuff and she or he should be kicked out. On the fear part, he's like a boxer, professional boxer, I don't know, and he's going against some amateurs. But even as a professional boxer going into some sort of fight, not for presidency now, it's his fear is different people, who are not running for presidency or sitting in different places. So he has this type of situation, moment. He would still feel the shiver, just a little bit, He knows he's in great shape. He knows he's the only person now at this point capable of running country. The agreement was already there that he would run the country, but still he fears that something could go wrong, maybe with Russia, maybe with the security services. So maybe he miscalculated something. So this type of minor fears, but basically there is nothing to stand now in his way for presidency and for long leadership.
There was a discussion about a possibility of OSCE observers coming to Uzbekistan. I don't know what happened on that subject, but Bakhtiar, your institute sends observers to various elections. Are you planning to send somebody to Uzbekistan?
No, we are not. And in fact, there's been some discussion among some policymakers around this town, whether this is a worthwhile effort. And the unanimous decision was, just given the nature of the beast, just given the time frame, just given, how it's all been set up, that, there's absolutely no way to have a credible election observer mission to monitor the upcoming elections. So, yeah, we will not be. And in our sister organization, NDI, they also do election observations. They will not be doing it. And another organization that will work closely with IFS, they will not be part of this either. So no. And as far as I know, no U.S., let me put it this way, no legitimate U.S. organization is going to be observing elections.
Bruce, are you planning to go to Uzbekistan as a reporter at least?
I had considered it a little bit, but especially after listening to Ed Schleger's story, I was glad that I made the the decision to pass on this one. I would mention that the OSCE is indeed going to monitor this election. ODIHR has deployed a team, and they are there. I'm not really surprised. They would. The Uzbek government invited them, and I'm sure that they're trying to make the point that they're willing to deal with the new administration when it comes in. So there will be Westerners there. I would like to go to Uzbekistan. I just don't think that the presidential election is the best opportunity to go, mostly because I don't think they would let you travel around a lot. You get to go to some polling places in the capital on election day and probably back to your hotel. I doubt they would just give me free access to roam the country and see what was going on with preparations. And anyway, there's no point. We already know what kind of preparations are there and how the campaign's been running. So, no, I have no plans to go.
I thought we wouldn't be much talking about the election itself, but it's really interesting to hear what you are saying and what the Uzbek authorities are doing in the name of election there. Final note on this, Alisher, what Mirziyoyev promising to deliver if he is elected?
A lot of things, actually. He plans to attract a lot of investment, that's what he says. So he said that there will be good relations with the neighboring countries, which was not there. He promises better government accountability. He promises to fix economy, as I said, investments, but also internally with the fight against corruption and opening the free conversion, convertibility of national currency. He promises to go into each area. Everything is should be fixed in Uzbekistan. Everything is broken by whatever you say, education, healthcare. On the healthcare, he promises cheaper, let's say, medicines, and the guaranteed number of medicines you can buy for good prices in every pharmacy. So these kind of things that people would need. On political freedoms, nothing. I mean, he kept silent completely on freedom of press. Nothing we heard so far on that. We haven't heard about any political shifts, like political reforms, parties, opposition, this stuff. On youth politics, nothing on that. Nothing on technology, this kind of science stuff. No, maybe it's too early in the day, but he was focusing on, again, and the one interesting thing, agriculture is his biggest, I think,
speciality.
Kind of a challenge, speciality. Yeah, he's again pronounced the moving away from a cotton monopoly and going towards fruit exports, all this stuff. So he promised a lot of things, and gradually, we don't see big changes though at this, of his over 80 days in power. Real changes, a lot of promises, a lot of kind of expectations. The thing that it's changed, we're hearing from business community that there are much less kind of inspections by tax authorities. They're breathing much better than they used to under President Karimov from that point of view. And this his initiative of so-called virtual hotline, when people can write, call, and complain about their lives, whatever they have, corruption and stuff. So that really works out well at this point, but for how long this will keep working, nobody knows. So this is like an accountability part. The better accountability is he's opening up a channel where people can freely, complain about the situation on the ground to the highest top of authorities, which is kind of a show, but at the same time, this may be the only way to deal with the problems.
Okay, I think enough talk on elections. I guess no one in the panel has any doubt about victory of Mirziyoyev. So what the future holds for Uzbekistan under President Mirziyoyev is an interesting question. And what his term as an acting president tell us about his rule or his possible rule as the next potential president. We will continue our discussion on this subject shortly. first, let me recap the debate. Today, we are discussing Uzbekistan's upcoming presidential elections and what to expect going forward. Discussing the subject with me are Bakhtiar Nishanov, Regional Deputy Director for Eurasia at the International Republican Institute in Washington, D.C. Alisher Siddiq is joining us from Prague. He is the Director of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Uzbekistan service. And also we have Bruce Pannier from Prague, who's the editor of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Central Asia blog called Kishlak Owazi. I am Mohammed Tahir, host of the Majlis here in Washington, D.C. Welcome back, gentlemen, to the Majlis. Now, let's look into the future based on what we have seen so far over the past 2 months. Regionally speaking, Mirziyoyev, I guess, did a pretty good job. Look at where the relationship of Uzbekistan stands today with some of its most problematic neighbors. I remember in our last discussion talking about possibility of some cosmetic changes on this, but it seems we have seen more than cosmetic changes. Look, Tajikistan began construction of the Rogan Dam, and Uzbekistan is silent about it. So what else you can expect in terms of regional integration as the Mirziyoyev comes into office as the president of Uzbekistan? Bakhtiar, can you take this question?
Absolutely. I think this is a fantastic premise, and this is something that, when we had this discussion a few months ago, this very much aligns, and what Alisher had been talking earlier too, it very much aligns with what our expectations were. The Uzbek government's got a huge, enormous problem on their hands, and that is the economic situation in the country. Under Karimov, obviously, it was, everything's good, we're doing great, GDP is growing, exponentially, but we know it wasn't the truth. And obviously, reasonable people in the government, they realize that too. To me, the trying to make good with the neighbors, and also some of the things that Ali should have been talking about earlier, that is, the decreased number of audits by, state inspections of small businesses, that kind of stuff. That is just Uzbek government acting reasonable is something new, is essentially what I'm saying, right? They are just acting reasonable. But because in the past this just was not the case, it just creates this, I think, illusion almost that, the Uzbek government is on this path to greater reform and to, to open up its markets, open up its economy, and do all these things. I think the one thing not to overlook, even with the situation with the dam in Tajikistan and, opening up the borders, look, there are business interests in Uzbekistan that benefit from these moves. In the past, under Karimov, the lobbying efforts were very, very, very limited. There were just a handful of people who'd make decisions in the country, and they would have to be run by the big boss. In this case, there are more interests. There are more business interests that are being able to lobby their interests a little bit more. I do think there's a somewhat of a kind of focused effort to give way and to support small enterprises, small and medium enterprises. I think that's been the kind of, despite the incredibly tough, incredibly planned economy, essentially based economy of Uzbekistan, small and medium enterprises in Uzbekistan, there were some outstanding companies there. Obviously, they would not survive for too long. They'd be taken over. If they were too successful, they would have been taken over. But the bottom line is there is this small group of companies and firms and organizations that are doing something economically. So they are, I think there's a genuine effort on behalf of some in the government, and I would argue that Rustam Azimov is one of those people who are trying to support and revive and to help these organizations. So I think that ultimately, though, the one thing not to overlook is, despite these, people seem to be very encouraged by these, and rightfully so. In Uzbekistan, any small thing that helps improve lives of millions of people is a good thing. Don't get me wrong, but I think what people might overlook a little bit, they call it this thaw, they call it this and that, but ultimately what it all does is just letting a little bit of pressure out to preserve the status quo, to preserve the political system that does not allow any opposition, that does not allow any dissent, that does not allow freedom of press. All the things that would ultimately transform Uzbekistan, a robust economy, a robust democracy. None of these things are truly happening, right? I do think that, and I'll wrap up because, sorry, taking too much of your time, but, I do think second year, we will see, the things that, big projects that, Mirziyoyev is pushing. It's, the new metro line here, streetcar in Samarkand. These are good things, but look at the decision-making process. a guy single-handedly decides, as of tomorrow, we're going to build this thing. There's no discussion about, economic implication of this. There's no, discussion about how that's going to affect, local communities. None of that stuff is happening, right? So the authoritarian way of doing business, while some things might be seen as good, it's still there, and it's not going anywhere. And I think this is what we got to be focusing on. This is what we got to be talking about.
Okay, we will be talking about that, Bruce. How is his balancing game with some of the regional powers, let's say China, Russia, EU, or the United States, and how you expect this going forward?
Well, he's met with officials from all those countries that you named, and at various levels. We know that Putin showed up to visit the gravesite of Karimov, and Medvedev was actually at Karimov's funeral, and Mirziyoyev met with both of them. So symbolically, of course, you would think that this shows that Russia has the greater interest. But the Chinese haven't been slow in sending their own officials, obviously not the president of China, but they've certainly sent a number of people over there, deputy ministers, to meet with Mirziyoyev and other Uzbek officials and let them know that they're, supporting the continuity in the form of government. So that's all to the good. And the U.S. has sent its own officials, assistant secretaries of state and things out there. I don't think, their policy, Uzbekistan's policy toward the bigger powers that are further afield is not going to change practically at all. Even toward Russia, people thought, warming ties with Russia, and there's been some very, very small signs of that, but nothing that would indicate that Uzbekistan is going to run toward Russia and try to become great friends and dramatically, significantly improve ties with Russia. Some talks with the military, some talks with energy companies, but that's pretty much the level. It's more the much more obvious change in policy is as you mentioned, toward Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. And at the same time, they've shown that they're willing to improve relations with Kazakhstan, which weren't necessarily bad, but weren't anything you would call great, and even Turkmenistan, where they've mentioned that we need to do more trade and things like that. So I'm optimistic about the connectivity within the region, because Uzbekistan seems like they're going to come out of this semi-isolationist state that they've been living in, and they've said that they're going to renew all the railway lines that are going into Tajikistan and going into Kyrgyzstan. And we saw yesterday that they signed an agreement to resume flights between Dushanbe and Tashkent, which had been canceled since 1992. So this is all to the good, without a doubt. I mean, I agree 100% with Bakhtiar that as far as domestic policy, we're just not going to see it. And I did see Safayev's comments today, and you'll remember him too, Mr. Tahir, that Uzbekistan can't move forward unless it opens up to society and implements more democratic reform and stuff. I don't really take those comments to be that serious, but it's interesting that someone on that level is actually bringing this subject up, I suppose. So it might be lip service, but at least it's the kind of lip service we haven't really heard too much of in a little while. So good to hear that they still remember words like democracy. And of course, we know that they're supposed to loosen their currency policy sometime next year. I'll be interested to see how that's going to work, without a doubt, because we saw what happened when in Kazakhstan when they let the tenge float free. It caused major social problems, and I can't believe that they weren't watching that in Uzbekistan and trying to learn some lessons from that. So it would be interesting to see that policy and how it's going to play out if they really do implement a policy of trying to let the Uzbek som float a little bit and see how it does against the major world currencies. Obviously, it's going to lose a lot of its value very quickly if they let it free float anyway.
Obviously, we will come to the domestic affairs shortly, but Alisher, Russia, I believe, it continues to press Uzbekistan. On one hand, it has already increased import of fruit items by 20-fold from Uzbekistan. On the other hand, it signed some sort of military agreement with the country. And I saw a report by your service yesterday that Lukoil is setting up network of gas stations in Uzbekistan. Where's Russia today in Uzbekistan's domestic affairs since Mirziyoyev is in office? And what do you anticipate going forward, Russian position to be in the country?
Yeah, the best kind of hope that this type of relations with Russia would have only economic investment type of nature when you have Mirziyoyev or anybody in the government taking decision based on economic interest. I mean, if something is in the economic interest of Uzbekistan, why not to do that? Or, under Karimov, that was not the case. I mean, the with Lukoil trying to set up the network of gas stations. Uzbekistan tried to do that itself. I mean, and it was mired in corruption, with in this sphere, when government controlled this. Now it was a huge problem in Uzbekistan. There's no gasoline. The prices are different in every region. It's a huge problem. So if Lukoil, which is has over 5,000 gas stations around the world, decided to invest in Uzbekistan and pay taxes, obviously, that is good type of cooperation that would need it to have even with Russia. Or the other news from today, the Russia's investment into agricultural kind of machinery, to build agricultural machinery. Who would do it? Nobody would come from Europe or from United States. Only some Russian people can do it. Sort of, if this relationship is like economic relationship, which is good for domestic economy, for creating jobs, let it be. But the concern is that these companies that come into Uzbekistan are basically ruled by Kremlin. So the concern is to how extent these economic relations later on backfire on politics, or will force Uzbekistan to give up its independence. That is like long-term concern. But now what they're trying to resolve is a short-term economic problems. There's no jobs and no economic development, no investments. So at this time of the day, investments from Russia, from China, from West are the best thing, thing to help the current leadership to stay on.
Alisher, when he came into office, Uzbekistan was facing huge crisis over the remittances and many other economic problems, obviously. So how he dealt with this?
At least the sense we have is that they're realizing they're in deep trouble. With the remittances, for instance, they say the remittance, the ratio of remittance in economy is 5% now. It's very low. It used to be much, much, much higher than that. So they know that investments are not coming because Karimov never allowed free currency convertibility. Mm-hmm. They now looking into it. They know that investments were not coming because of corruption. They are looking at it, at least on the level of statements. We don't know what will be the real thing in the end of the day, But the sense and the promises, this pre-election promises, the hopes are going that way. So they're trying to give more freedom to businesses, because businesses were really fighting with current economic crisis, and they would really fall apart if these government agencies' inspections will put additional burden at this point. So that's why they just hands off of business, let it be, because if these guys die, that's end for the whole regime. So that's why I think the realization is that the economy should be the priority. And there's a very low the cotton harvest was very bad this year in comparison with last year, and the situation is changing, in the region.
Okay, interesting. Moving on a little bit on a different subject, Bakhtiar, he released several prisoners. Certainly, those are the guys shouldn't be there in first place, but in the fact that they were released, it's a good news. If you look into this step in a broader picture, does it give you any hope for better future in terms of rule of law or respect for human rights in the country?
I hate to be that guy, but no. The people that have been released are mostly folks they've released them whether for health reasons, because who wants somebody who's recognized as a political prisoner dying at their hands. But if there are multiple people in Uzbekistan, the one thing to realize is when we talk about Karimov, we always think about this constant brutality, this constant imprisonment of activists. But one of the tactics that Karimov had employed was we're going to release somebody, make us look good. I mean, especially if you think about back to early 2000s when there was a fairly strong relationship between U.S. and Uzbekistan, in the fight against terrorism. That's what the Uzbek government would do. I was closely involved with that, and they would release a couple of people, a couple of people that the U.S. government or somebody else, international actors would identify as political prisoners, and that makes them look good. That they go about talking about it. They would allow an investigation of a torture case, when they'd been 100% sure that it wasn't torture. So they would do these small things, and it would just basically give hope to people that, hey, look, we are seeing changes, we are seeing things. The government's acting, like it should. But then and this is genuinely a challenge and a call to the Mirziyoyev government, and I do, for the sake of people in Uzbekistan and for the sake of people in the region, I hope he's successful in his economic reforms. I hope he's successful in other reforms. But this is a genuine challenge to the regime, to the incoming cabinet, new government in Uzbekistan. Release all political prisoners. Let them go. Let them go. Do not arrest people for expressing their thoughts and opinions. These people are the ones who truly make a difference, in the sense that they are the ones who are voicing concerns. They're going to help you along the way to build a better society, a fair society, a more just society. So I really hope that, I don't know if, anyone close to President-to-be Mirziyoyev is listening to this, but if they are, this is not for the sake of international community. It's not for the sake of, organizations like Freedom House or Human Rights Watch. Not at all. This is for the sake of Uzbekistan. And it's, if they do want a prosperous future and a prosperous economy for Uzbekistan, they have to let these people go and truly honor and respect the Constitution. That's all we can ask for, right? We're not asking for anything above and beyond that. For the sake of people in Uzbekistan, for their own credibility, I would hope they would do that.
Alisher, has there been any change in restrictions that are placed in your activity in Uzbekistan, activities of your stringers, your contributors in Uzbekistan since he is in power? And what is your prognosis going forward then?
We don't have any stringers and correspondents in Uzbekistan. Let's come from that. We have people who call us, with whom we are in touch, citizen journalists, but of course not Radio Free Europe is not physically in Uzbekistan, as you know. Also, the thing is, as I said, Mirziyoyev never expressed his opinions on this, or never showed his policy on this. He maybe doesn't know that this topic exists, or he doesn't know the topic. The guy was always in the field, in the cotton fields, running the country, so he had never dealt with this himself, If you look, he was always far away from public politics. He never gave a single interview. Or if tell me. He never answered journalists' questions. And I don't know whether he plans any press conferences and how that will happen, what is his strategy on that. It's like on political life and freedoms, I don't see he has any strategy. I agree with Bakhtiar on the political prisoners issue, that the release of political prisoners is also kind of a piecing measure for the West. Unfortunately, Uzbek-American or Uzbek-European relations boiling down to this political prisoners issue, yeah? So they release, they praise, they release, they praise, yeah? Sort of no other issues like major like economy, things are on the map. That's why this situation with America, with Europe, pushing Uzbekistan further and further towards Russia, or to China in terms of investments. So, the alternative for them is the investment. Whoever promises bigger investments, they are ready to work with them. Now, Uzbek government is traveling back and forth to United States, negotiate repatriation of frozen assets of companies associated with former President Islam Karimov's daughter Gulnara Karimova. They're not seeing a lot of success. So I think that's also kind of on the map, on the table now, with especially on the further relations with United States. And we all read Washington Post's article on that. So, I'm kind of surfing over all topics, but they're so interconnected that we kind of discussing everything at once.
Let me just jump in real quick on this.
Right.
100%. This is, all of these things are so interconnected, 100%. the one thing that I hope that the Uzbek government realizes is that, whether it's a Chinese investor, whether it's a Russian investor, a European, an American, the one thing that ultimately it boils down to, whether how long they stay in a country, and we've seen it even with Russian investors in Russia, in Uzbekistan, where their assets have been taken over. The rule of law is important. The rule of law is important not only to citizens of that country, but also to, if I'm thinking about investing to a country, hey, I better make sure that, I'm going to have, if something happens, I'm going to have a just hearing before an independent judge. So I think if hopefully, and this is one of the angles that, I think we should be working is, Uzbekistan is definitely in dire straits in terms of its economic situation. They will want, investments. They will want more investment, more employment. These things truly are basically just it's a burning platform essentially at this point. Continue to emphasize, look, I mean, if you guys want the human rights and democracy thing, okay, you may not care for the sake of human rights and democracy, but you know what? If you want investment, you better care about a rule of law. If we have rule of law, we have independent judiciary, I think we'll have ways to then keep those who are responsible accountable. We have ways to keep the Uzbek government accountable. So I think this is one of the ways we should be talking about it. And, again, just going back to what Alisher said, don't make no mistake. I mean, if I gave a wrong impression of saying, I see these, state, as Bruce so cleverly put, this is just a stage election. There are things that are, that are being done to show that things are moving in a different direction. It's just a stage thing. The Uzbek government believes they can manage it. That's the only reason why it's happening. But that said, there are definite needs and there are definite things that they want and they need for them to hold on to power, B, to not have a civil war breakout. So I think there are ways for the international community and for those of us who care about these issues to continue talking, continue pushing, and ultimately, hopefully help realize some folks in that government that, this is for their own benefit, this is for the benefit of people as well.
Thank you, Bakhtiar. It's an interesting debate, but unfortunately we are running out of time. But let's end the debate, Bruce, with a little bit, let's say, wishful thinking. If he likes, he's in a perfect position to start a clean page. What can he do to leave a legacy that he and everyone else can be proud of later? I know when Berdimuhamedov was coming into power, we had similar discussion, but in terms of Mirziyoyev, what do you have to say?
He doesn't appear to be a reformer. Now, maybe he'll change, and maybe I'm wrong. Berdimuhamedov did do a few things at the start, and I suppose we got reason to be hopeful that in the first 6 months or year, when with Mirziyoyev as president, that he will take some even small steps to loosen up a little bit the controls over the society. I don't think he would go as far as to include genuine alternative political parties or anything like that into the system. Remember, there's a lot of people that got their hands in the pot, and as far as the government and the bureaucracy, and so there's going to be a lot of resistance to change, because that would mean that someone's got to lose somewhere along the line, and he has to hold everything together the way it was put together by Karimov. So it's going to be tough, but we'll probably see some small changes which will at least appear to be positive in the first few months. And I think one of the things that we really got to look at after this election is when he gets around to appointing ministers. He can keep everyone that's been in there, who's in there right now, but his party technically is going to have to appoint a new prime minister, and that might give us a really good idea of what kind of course he's going to take. If he picks someone who's just a yes man, who no one's ever heard of, then we can't really expect a whole lot of change coming out of the country. But there was talk that maybe it would be Rustam Azimov, the current finance minister of the country. So we'll get a good look. We'll get a small look anyway at the course it's going to take. Even if he was a true reformer, there's not a whole lot he can do. The system is really entrenched in that country, and the best he can hope for is small steps here and there that would improve the situation in terms of rights, in terms of the economy, and on and on and on. But there is reason to be hopeful that he'll do something in the first year that he's in power.
Thank you very much for your insightful comments, Bruce Pannier, editor of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Central Asia blog, Kishlak Awazi. And also, big thanks goes to Bakhtiar Nishanov, Regional Deputy Director for Eurasia at the International Republican Institute, and Alisher Sadiq, Director of Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty's Uzbekistan service. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining the Majlis today.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And this is from me, Mohammed Tahir, host of the Majlis, Arab Central Asia podcast. Bye-bye. Until next week.